My name is Kathy Fitzgerald. I'm with the League of Women Voters here in Billings. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan organization that offers education to the public on social issues that are important to our membership. The right to a clean and healthful environment, as given to us by the Montana Constitution, ties closely to the issue of water conservation. This event is supported by the League of Women Voters of Montana and will be recorded. So if you have anyone that couldn't be here today, they can go to our Facebook page to get a peek at the speakers. Today we hope to give you some important things to think about. Why is water conservation important in Billings? How does water use tie to the city's energy use? How can you make a difference by implementing water-saving ideas in your yards? And where can you get started? Each of our outstanding speakers today have agreed to a short summary on their topic and will welcome questions after they speak. And then we'll include time to mingle after the door prizes are awarded at the end of the presentations. Our first speaker addressing the importance of water conservation is Susan Gilberts. Susan grew up on a ranch in northeastern Wyoming and attended the University of Wyoming, where she earned her bachelor and master degrees in communication. Later, she attended Texas A&M University, where she earned her PhD in geography. Of late, Susan has concentrated on sustainability and water issues on the Yellowstone River Valley. Her latest book, which you could purchase on the table here after our event, follows our local issues throughout the valley and concludes with a call for action to move forward in ways that will allow future generations to live in a recognizably similar manner as we do. We must decide now what to hang on to and what can be let go. Please give Susan Gilberts a warm welcome.
Thank you for coming this morning. Is that working? Okay. I got the invitation a couple of months ago and I was thrilled about it, and I told my class one day, yeah, I get 15 minutes to talk about water, and they just died laughing. So we're going to start with some context, and we'll see if I can just move through most of this fairly quickly. So I'll start with a global context. This is what's referred to out there as Day Zero. It happened in Cape Town, and in 2018, they really came close to absolutely running out of water. And they actually shut off neighborhoods, and people did not have water being delivered to their homes. They had to go to spigots and fill up 5-gallon jugs, and they narrowly averted a complete disaster because they got a nice rainstorm, number one, and then also because they had engaged these rather draconian water policies for a few weeks. But imagine if we just had to shut off our water here in Billings and go to a public spigot and be rationed. Well, you get 5 gallons for your household today, or whatever that was that they were doing. I mean, it was really dire. But here we are in the Yellowstone River Valley, and I've got the Billings marked with the star. We're kind of halfway through the whole valley. Most of our water comes out of Wyoming, actually. The drainage is about shared half and half spatially with Wyoming, and the water that comes from Wyoming is all regulated through the Wyoming, Montana, North Dakota Compact, which is a deeply flawed document, and we could do a whole class on that if you want to. We have enjoyed of late some nice rains, and I was thrilled to look up where we were in terms of moisture. And we were in kind of the good green, on the edge of not so great, but certainly not in a drought situation here. This was just last week. But we know that water is a contentious issue, and whether you knew this or not, the number one case in the state of Wyoming, Wyoming case number 1, is about 2 irrigators who got in a fight with shovels, and one was charged with assault. And that went all the way to the Montana Supreme Court because the guy who got hit said, hey, I get to defend my water rights. And the Supreme Court, even in 1868, said, well, yeah, you get to defend your water rights, but not with a shovel. So, now, here's the cheat sheet for my final in my class. The legal context we can kind of put into 2 categories. The very early context is on the left, and that's all about prior appropriations, and that's about first in time, first in right. It's actually connected philosophically and somewhat legally with the General Mining Act, which is still in effect as a federal law. And basically the General Mining Act was to protect the prospectors who went out and found a little stake, a gold stake, a silver stake, and that if they had been there first, then they had the first right to it. Now, most of those mining operations in those days also required water because they were panning or using pacer techniques, and they would bring the water to their mine because that was easier than taking all of that stuff coming out of the mine down to where the water was. So a lot of those early mining stakes also then were claiming early water stakes as well. And so we kind of have this deep connection to first in time, first in right. And it sounds pretty easy, right? You were here first, you have the most senior water right. The problem with that is that the records in those days were horrible, and many of those basin records are still under dispute. We have the Montana Water Court that started in 1973. They thought they'd be done in 5 years. They're still not done. And they're supposed to adjudicate these old situations where 2 people are claiming that I have a very old water right. Now in 73, we can kind of jump to the modern context. Well, let me start with 69, when we passed the Murphy rights. And that was a group of conservationists who came together and said, hey, what about the fish? Don't they have some rights to water? And so, yes, indeed, we passed Murphy rights, which apply to certain streams and rivers in Montana. And then that was broadened with the SPA 124 and 75 to say that in-stream flows are important and that they do have to be protected by the state as public resources, that the in-stream flow itself is a public resource. And in general, the water belongs to the state. You can own a water right, but you can't own the water itself. So we started in the mid-20th century to recognize that we just didn't want to de-water everything and just simply fight over who got the last drop, that maybe we needed to leave some water in the rivers as well. And that did begin to change things. In 76, they wrote a planning document for the valley, and it was basically an alarm bell because there was talk at that time of a great many coal enterprises, and some of those would have been coal slurry systems. And so there was a great concern about water in the valley and who was going to get that water and who was going to use it in what ways. Interestingly, in 78 then, another legislative piece went through, and this is important to us. We're getting to the good stuff now. The 78 piece said that they created what are called the water reservations, and that includes municipalities, it includes the irrigation districts, and it includes some state agencies to protect those in-stream flows. Quite frankly, the 78 legislation to protect towns, irrigation, and the in-stream flows, I don't think they ever anticipated that we might have a conflict among those groups. I think there was a thinking there'll always be enough water for those groups, let's protect them. That's all still in place, and those are called the water reservations. Now, Native Americans also have federal reserve rights, and that comes into play more on the lower basin than us, but it does mean that the lower valley has to concern itself with the federal reservations for the Indian communities, the reservation communities. Now, the 76 plan stayed in place until 2014, and that's when we rewrote our water plan for the basin. So that needed to be done, as you can just think about how long that was in between. And so that's where my research team got involved, and we helped the state execute, pulling together people throughout the valley to find out what their concerns were, find out what they were worried about, and then to help them as a decision body come to some good decisions about how to share water. So this is mostly what I'm going to focus on, this potential conflict that may be arising sooner than we think between irrigation, municipalities, and in-stream flows, and then also what's actually maybe in the plan itself. Now, my goal is to say, why do we need water sharing? So I'm going to focus on some data, and most of it's coming out. This one does not come out of the state water plan, but I just pulled this the other day. But the state water plan is where most of this information comes from, the basin plan. And this is just to show you that historically we have had wet seasons and dry seasons, and they kind of go in cycles. And then you notice around 2000 there was a very dry period, and that was certainly known as a drought period. And this is kind of a close-up on that. If you look at what's going on, it was very dry between 2000 and 2005, and then it kind of tapered off, but then you see what's happened in the last couple of years. We've really ratcheted up the drought issue there again. And that's where we're gonna have some impact. So there's Billings on, this was the 5-3 map of drought in the state, and we're just on the edge of the severe drought. And what you should also notice is that where most of our water is coming from, those mountains of Wyoming, are in that severe drought state. So we really should anticipate some water problems coming into this next year. I do want to mention basin closures. That's when we say to people there are no new water rights to be held. And there are closures in the state. The only one currently directly affecting the Yellowstone is coming out of Wyoming, that bright green one there. That's an administrative closure. It means nobody gets new water rights there. Now, I just heard an article, or heard a news release a couple weeks ago about Colorado Springs. There was a developer, he was going to go east of Colorado Springs out into some former farmland. He was going to do a development of 200 houses. He came for his permits, and they said, nope. He said, why not? And they said, we don't have any water for you. You can build houses out there, fine with us, but there is no water. Colorado Springs has basically shut down development because they don't have any water to go to new development. So start thinking about that. That gets pretty scary because a lot of our economy is based on development, right? And it's possible here for us to have some closures as well. In 2014, in the basin plan, they did note that between Livingston and Billings and below Billings, basically until you get to the Bighorn River inputs, they were expecting that in-stream flow reservation might limit new appropriations. Now, we haven't hit that yet, but that was already recognized in 2014, that the in-stream flow requirements were going to start to come in conflict with development and things that were going to possibly be happening. So here in the valley, we know that Billings is the biggest metropolitan area. That's represented by all those dots. We were projecting that by 2035 we might have 280-some thousand people in the valley. That leveled out a little bit, I think, because of the pandemic, although we might be seeing an upswing again. Our 2022 numbers are just over 165,000 here in Yellowstone. So we do grow at a pretty good clip in this community. That's part of what makes this community thrive, but it's also going to be the challenge. Water's going to be the challenge. You might be curious about some of our local supplies. The big ditch that runs through town, the BBWA ditch, they're entitled to 217,000 acre-feet of water each season. They have water rights have an opening and a closing date every year, and spatial limits and quantitative limits as well. What we'll notice is that overall in the basin, the BWA ditch represents about 12% of the total ag takeout. We have several takeout facilities through the valley that are serving agriculture and irrigation. Municipal uses is 1%. So you think, well, that's not very much, and it's not, but we have to think about consumptive versus non-consumptive uses. Sometimes you use water and it's gone. Sometimes you use water, you flush your toilet, we treat it, and it goes back in the river. So there's some balances that go in there that we could account for. I want to mention just briefly that some of these issues are discussed in my book, and I won't dwell on that. But I'll end here thinking about day zero for Billings, and what is that going to represent, day zero, where we really cannot even service those reserve rights that people think are absolutely inviolable, that they are going to be there. And I don't know that that's really going to be true. I think we have to think about it. Will we ask farmers to stop irrigating so that people in town can have all the water they want? Will we ask people in town to ration water so that irrigators have everything they want? What about the in-stream flows? How do we keep those going? And ultimately, if we're concerned about this, we should be thinking about what are the alternatives. How do we turn the ship around? And I would say that we have to reduce our use, and we have to talk about conservation. And I'm really glad that we have wonderful experts here to talk about those things. So, thank you. Quick questions? Yes.
Yes, I've been looking when I've driven through the ag land. I noticed one farmer did something that none of the other farmers did. That those irrigation ditches, he dug them really deep, and he was using less water filling those ditches through the season, because the water went down deeper and got into the subsoil underneath the plants, and his plants looked better using less water.
So there are a couple of things that we know in this valley, is that the flood irrigation has actually some good purposes. You can use a lot less water using sprinkler systems or different subsystems, but we also serve a lot of shallow aquifers, and there are a lot of homes that if we stop irrigating this valley with flood irrigation, they're not going to have water in their homes. And what we do know is in the open ditches, there's a certain amount of evaporation that happens. So if you have a narrower, deeper ditch, you probably minimize the evaporation as well. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Thank you so much, Susan. Our second speaker, Louis Ingalls, is the Billings Water Quality Superintendent, where he leads a highly skilled staff at the water treatment plant and the wastewater treatment plant. In short, Louis's job is to ensure that all drinking water in the city of Billings is of the highest quality, and that the sewage is properly treated and safely returns to the Yellowstone River. The other part of Louis's job is to ensure that we have ample water supply now and into the future as Billings grows. Louis also has a keen interest in sustainability and energy management. This drove him to take on the city lead for the Billings Energy and Conservation Commission, which advises City Council on ways to make Billings a leader in energy and resource conservation. For many reasons, water conservation will become more and more important to Billings in the future. Lewis is here to talk about why it is so important to our community and actions you can take to help Billings become a leader in water conservation in an increasingly arid West. Please welcome Lewis Ingalls.
Thanks, Kathy, for that nice introduction. Can everybody hear me okay? We'll take just a second to load up, but I thought Susan did a great job kind of painting the context of the Yellowstone River and how important this valley is. And I was telling Neil, sitting beside me, that those 1978 reservation rights are very important specifically to this West End Reservoir project that is coming for Billings, so that it all provides a good context for what I'm going to talk about today. Let me start the slideshow here. Technology is my favorite thing, I promise. There we go. I put this slide up there for two reasons. That two of my highest values are family and environment. And this kind of represents the reality of both, right? These are my three children, Rosalie, Leo, and Dominic. And Dominic is obviously very happy about family pictures. And I like to show that because that's really the truth about raising kids right now. It's not what the family pictures actually look like that was the experience. And then I'd like to show this other picture from, it's actually a place in the Yellowstone River Valley that's undisclosed. And it is from those Wyoming mountains. I am from Wyoming originally, so fishing is something that I thoroughly enjoy. So we talked about 1% of the water in the Yellowstone being allocated for those municipal uses. That represents a lot of water, and I like to give some context to how much water Billings uses by illustrating it through a football field analogy. Our treatment plant is capable of producing 60 million gallons per day. That's our drinking water plant. Typically in the winter we use around 15 million gallons. Well, how much water is 15 million gallons? I mean, it's such a large number. How do you put that into context? So I like this slide because it illustrates that. So 15 million gallons is essentially 35 feet over the playing surface of a football field. And that's daily in the wintertime. That's for showering, that's for homes, for cleaning, basic municipal uses. That accounts for about 35 feet over the playing surface of that football field. So here's where it gets interesting. In the summertime, that can jump to as much as a 120-foot pool of water over that football field. So while in context of the Yellowstone River, it may seem like that's 1%, maybe that's not that much. This is a lot of water. This is a whole lot of water, and we have to treat every drop of that to drinking water standard. And those regulations are getting tighter and tighter, and they're very heavily regulated, even more regulated than bottled water. So it's a challenge for our group. and I'm very privileged to work with our group to produce that amount of water day in and day out for Billings. So where does that water go? So I did some research on the hottest day, the highest peak day that we had, which at one point we had 57 million gallons per day last summer, which was part of the reason we implemented water restrictions for the first time since the 1970s. Where does that water go? So I have this slide up here that illustrates where that water is being used on the hottest day. So our city, we call them pressure zones. So we all know that not all of Billings is on the same topography. We have homes that are on top of the rims, we have homes that are up in the heights, we have them on the west end. Well, so as the topography changes, we need to change the pressure so that at your home you get the right amount of pressure. So basically the city's broken into these different pressure zones. And there's a few things I want to highlight about this slide. So on a very hot day during the summer, typically the average person will use about 400 gallons per day. You saw that earlier, probably 2/3 of that, and I'm hoping we can get to around a half fairly soon, is for watering lawns. So you can kind of look at in the left-hand part of this slide and see which zones we're using, the most per capita. Now, obviously, there's a lot more people downtown than there are in the far west extents or north extents. But I want to point out that some of our newer developments within Billings are using quite a bit more water than anybody else. Like if you look at, let's just look at the West End, for instance, Zone 4, it's using 150% of what the per capita usage throughout the rest of the city is. You look at even further west, in that kind of Ironwood area, on a per capita basis, it's almost 3 times what the typical person is using. And I want to understand that there's fewer people out there, so that number is going to be inflated, right? But what concerns me is that as we're building, are we building drought-resilient landscapes? And I know a couple of our experts are going to talk about this a little bit more. One of the challenges that brings for us is that we're pumping water further and further and further away from our treatment plant. And we have actually been trending a little bit down, except for last year, in per capita water use. But what's changing is where the water is being used. It's being used further west and further north. So that's one of the challenges, and how do we change that? I mentioned that average on a very hot summer day, the typical person's going to be using about 400 gallons per minute. So one other thing I want to illustrate here. Water is really heavy. There's a reason that we have hydro power plants, is because water is really heavy stuff. We've all felt this, right? It's 8.3 pounds. So think about how much energy it takes to move 60 million gallons of this a day. A lot of people, they call it the water energy nexus, but when you're moving water or you're treating water, it is very energy intensive. So I use the analogy here of a car. So like typical person, very hot summer day, using 400 of these a day, right? So that equates to about 32,000 pounds. So 32,000 pounds, that's basically the size of a compact vehicle. So that's being delivered to 115,000 people daily. So it's effectively 115,000 cars driving from our water plant to each individual home every single day. So that's a lot of energy, right? People don't realize that one thing, if you're concerned about energy management or concerned about your carbon footprint, that one thing is a huge, huge thing. I mean, that can really cut down. If you're interested in in curbing your energy use, one of the best things you can do is conserve water. And I've kind of been saying that over and over, and Neil's on the Energy Commission with me, and they're probably really tired of me saying that that's one of the best things we can do for energy. But I want to reiterate that that point is very key to the city. So, monthly municipal bill in Billings. You probably wouldn't expect this, but electricity bill monthly for the city of Billings is about $280,000 a month. About 73% of that is related to moving or treating water. Most of it moving it, but a lot of it is for treating it at the wastewater plant. So again, I just want to create this tie that that water and energy kind of go hand in hand in this city and how we're using energy. Or technology. But I'm an engineer, so I want to be solutions focused here, right? So I painted some of the picture and the context like Susan had illustrated as well. Okay, what do we do? What are some tools, what are some things that we can actually do as a community to better the situation? So one of the things that we've done is called Water Smart. And you may or may not know it, but anybody who is signed up for City of Billings utilities account through Public Works has access to this Water Smart platform. I'll play this video because it does a good job of kind of explaining what Water Smart is to give you some tools for improving your water efficiency.
Have you ever wondered how you can save money on your water bill, identify and resolve leaks, and protect your property from potentially costly water damage? Do you have a good handle on your water consumption? Do you know how much you use each month, where it goes, and what it costs? What if your water utility could offer specific suggestions on ways you can save money each month on your bill and exactly where you use water? What if you could choose to be alerted when your water use was really high, or if there were a special rebate program just for you? Well, now you can have all that and more. Your utility has partnered with WaterSmart software to provide you with a customer water portal in which you can view your usage history, get money-saving recommendations, sign up for usage alerts, and much more. To register for free, just go to your utility's website and look for the WaterSmart link. All you need is your account ID and zip code, and you'll be well on your way to becoming more WaterSmart. WaterSmart, intelligence beyond the meter.
WaterSmart site, but I think I'm going to be out of time before we do that. But what I have a suggestion for everybody here is just to Google Billings WaterSmart. You get to our utility page, and then you can get on there, and it talks about specific actions to you based on your use that you can take to improve your water efficiency. I'll hop off real quick. I think I brought it up on the internet here. I may run out of time, but so this is my WaterSmart account. So currently we're using 64 gallons per day, my family. So I'm going to brag a little bit. I'm in the top 20% of water users right now. So I'm trying to practice what we preach. So you can see your water score, understand a high bill, understand potentially if you have a leak. This is where I wanted to get to, but I think it's short on time here. Specific recommended actions for your water use to tailor to you, and we're trying to make this better, and Kathy's been involved as well with Public Works to give us feedback and say, well, we want to make this a little more specific to Billings. This is a national platform about how you can improve water use, and a lot of that's it's generic to to the entire country. We want to get a little more specific with Billings, what specific plans work with Billings, and so we're trying to get it better. But there are a lot of great tools in this. Please sign up for that because it'll really help you understand your bill and where you can improve. I'm going to stop there in the interest of time, but I'll go ahead and take a couple questions.
I have a question.
Sure.
Did you say how many gallons we use in the summer per day on kind of an average? I know you said 15 in the winter.
Yeah, so it depends on the summer. I mean, if it's real, well, I'll just say we hit about 50 on average was last summer, 50 million gallons a day. I think that's right at that 120-foot mark in that analogy of on top of a football field, but yeah, so it more or less triples.
Good.
How do golf courses factor into all this, and are there plans for the future of doing things differently or having golf courses be brown? Or, I mean, I feel like in Phoenix where they're running out of water and they have like 80 golf courses. I mean, but in Billings, part of that West End usage could also be, I mean, the Highlands is up, or not the Highlands, the Yellowstone Country Club is out there. So how much do golf courses factor in?
So it depends on which golf course you're in town, but most of them are actually off of city water. I know in Yellowstone they use the cove ditch out there to water, which is a better choice than using municipal water because it's there and you don't have to move it and treat it to as high a standard. I know in the Heights, Eagle Rock is off of a ditch. I know that Lake Hills, we actually explored with Lake Hills a little bit, reusing our wastewater for them. Unfortunately, it didn't pencil out to pump it that far to them, but they also use the BUWA. So most of them, and I'm pretty sure Yagan is also, I have to verify, Peter Yagan is not on our municipal system if I remember correctly. So we've done a good job with that of not using that, but that's something that for sure from a water rights perspective could be a concern in the future. Go ahead.
What's the difference between consumptive and non-consumptive use for Billings? Let's go back in the river.
So basically that 15 or 35 feet of water over that football field, that's all going to be non-consumptive. That's going to come to your house, you're going to use it in whether a shower or cleaning, and it's going to go back to the river, treated. So that's not going to be a consumptive use. Irrigation is a consumptive use. So anything that's going to go on your lawn is going to be evapotranspirated by the plants, and that would be considered consumptive. So the red pool would be consumptive. The blue pool over the top of that football field would be non-consumptive. Yep.
I received a very helpful text message a few months ago saying I might have a leak. Does that go out to everyone, or do you have to sign up for one of these software programs?
And that does, I believe, and I think Shadi's here, but I believe that if you're part of WaterSmart, are you part of WaterSmart?
I am not sure. That's why I wasn't sure if that was why I got the text, or does a text like that go out to anyone?
I think it's anybody with a municipal account. I could have that wrong because I'm not in that area of our work, but
I think it's just the WaterSmart.
it is just
Speaking
WaterSmart.
from experience.
Okay.
If it is
You know better.
WaterSmart, it makes sense to sign up because it was very helpful.
Yep.
How to identify a leak and how much extra water I've used over 5 days.
Yep.
Absolutely, and also you can actually set it up so that it will alert you if you're out of town, that you know you're not going to be using the water at all. If there's meter running, and it's going to alert you too. So lots of alerts, you can sign up under settings and communications. So it's a good way to explore and make sure that you're notified when you're not intending to use water, or if there's a leak in the house.
Thanks, Shadi. Shadi works with us. She's our project and communication partner. Okay, sorry. I can answer maybe questions after. All right.
Thanks.
Sorry. Thank you.
Thanks. Information, and thank you for making that tie between energy use and water consumption. So we'll move to our third speaker, Neil Kiner owns and operates Second Nature Consulting, a landscape architecture and planning firm in Billings. Neil is a North Dakota native and graduate of North Dakota State University in the landscape architecture program. In 2006, he moved to Billings and became a licensed landscape architect. Since moving to Billings, Neil has made efforts to volunteer and support various community groups, including being chapter president of the Idaho-Montana chapter of the American Society of Landscape Architects, served on the City of Billings Board of Adjustment and the Community Development Board. Most recently, Neil began a 4-year term on the City of Billings Energy and Conservation Commission along with Lewis. Neil and his wife have 3 children, age 14, 12, and 4, and we appreciate taking his time away from family this Saturday morning to help us out. Please welcome Neil Kiner.
Well, I don't have any cool slides to share with you, so I just have these cool things to share with you that I keep dropping. Well, thank you, and welcome, everyone. I appreciate you guys coming today. It's great to see so many faces out here learning about water conservation in our community. I think the previous speakers, it's really great context to be able to put this in, and it's great to be able to see kind of, we start at like a 30,000 foot level of how much water kind of comes through our community and is used for agriculture and different uses, and now we're kind of moving into our specific municipal uses. And I'm here to talk about primarily irrigation use. As Lewis mentioned, our baseline consumption usage in the city of Billings fluctuates around 15 million gallons a day. That's your normal, boiling water, taking showers, flushing toilets, those kinds of things. But as we started studying water consumption with the Energy and Conservation Commission, the elephant in the room was obvious. I mean, it was water consumption and the use of irrigation and how much that costs us taxpayers. When we see irrigation use spike over 3 times our baseline, not only does it cost money to pump that water and to get it to the use, but we also have to plan and size our infrastructure to accommodate that size or that volume of water. So, that's upsizing pipes, that's, lift stations and things of that nature that sometimes kind of gets forgotten about because we have to size it for the maximum usage. 15 million gallons is easy to ship or pump compared to 60. So, just want to talk to you guys about that because, at the end of the day, it's our own personal responsibility to manage our irrigation systems at our homes and businesses. And so, I'd like to try to challenge you all to trying to manage your irrigation usage in a smart way. And I'm here to kind of talk about some of those things that we all can do to help improve our own personal usage at home. So one of the first things I want to talk about is microclimates. In the past, irrigation design was kind of, we'll just throw water on everything and make sure that the hottest, driest spot gets enough water. Okay, so your hottest, driest spot stayed green, but the rest of your lawn in other areas that maybe were shady or on the north or the east sides of the building, now they're getting too much water, and sometimes it can be a lot. So I want to talk about microclimate variation and how that applies to your own home. Having understanding of those kinds of variations are going to really drive different irrigation design. Your irrigation design needs to match your microclimate that you have at your home. So what that means is let's separate these uses into zones that we can control so that the north and the east side of your home don't need as much water as maybe the south and the west side. So we can control these in different zones, and that's really a big water sewer in itself is being able to identify how we can break these into sensible control zones. Part of that is driven by new technology. So I get called out to a lot of different homes and businesses and things, and everyone's seen one of these. I like to call these a flood irrigator. They're called a spray head. They pop up, a little fan of water comes out, and it dumps water way faster than your soil can ever take it. So part of our irrigation design criteria is that we look at what kind of soil do you have? How much water can your soil take? And we talk about the precip rate. So how fast is that water coming? So, you know, we've had some really, really great rains here recently. They've been slow soakers. Our soil can accommodate that. Sometimes later in the spring, summer, we get those gully washers that we get an inch or so of water and it's 15 minutes. Most of that water doesn't have a chance to soak into the landscape. It's not as effective. Same thing goes for irrigation design. We want to apply the water in as slow of a fashion as needed to accommodate the soils that we have. So, understanding your soils. Soils around Billings are clay, some sand clay, depending on where you're at, especially the lower in elevation you get, the slower the soil can accommodate the precip. Another couple things that we talk about are evapotranspiration rates. I've heard a few people talk about that. That really is an indicator of how much water is your plant using out of the soil and exhaling basically through into the atmosphere. So grasses and things of that nature really suck a lot of water up through the soil and release it through the air. So that in combination with our precip rate and another factor called distribution uniformity, which is exactly what it sounds like. How uniform are we distributing the water? So we factor all of these things in, and that's kind of going to help guide our irrigation design. What kind of heads to use, how to zone it, and what kind of plants we're watering. So it's not, there's a little bit more science to it than it used to be, I think. I think we're learning more about how to be better purveyors of water. So that's on the distribution side. One of the things that Carol and I first met about, this is over a year, probably a year or so ago, she called me up and says, hey, I've got this thing. It's a controller. It's the thing in your garage that turns your irrigation system on and off. However, most of the stuff that we have in our garages these days is 20 years old. These new controllers that they are coming out with now, and this one's called Beehive, it's by Orbit. One of you is going to take it home today. Then there's other manufacturers. These are called a smart controller. And what it does is once you hook it up, it talks to your irrigation system, but it responds to your weather at your home or in your general vicinity. So it's talking to the internet and saying, okay, today we have a 30% chance of rain. We're going to hold off in watering. We're going to see if we catch that shower of rain today. And if we don't, we're going to turn the irrigation system on. Likewise, we just had an inch of rain yesterday. We don't need to water today. We're going to turn it off. And it does all of that for you. And it's in constant contact with weather stations in our area. And what did you save? Just by doing this, she saved.
Yeah, the Water Sense certified EPA says up to 30%. So I know the first month comparatively it was like 50%, but over the past couple of years averaged about 20%.
Yeah, so I mean these are not expensive. These are less than $100, but you're going to save that amount of money in your water bill, and you're going to feel good doing it. So I encourage you to look into these things. They're very simple. Most homeowners can wire them themselves. You're just dealing with your irrigation wires and just plugging them in. And then it's very pretty much a step-by-step process on how to activate it and get it going for you. Another thing you can do is you can take these old flood irrigators, as I like to call them, and you can convert them into drip irrigation, which greatly reduces water consumption. It's applying water where the plant needs it as opposed to let's just water everything. So what these things do is you can buy these kits. This happens to be a Rainbird. I think there's all different kinds of manufacturers of these things. But basically it takes your existing head here and you screw these pieces in, and now you have a drip system. And so, you know, again, a fairly low entrance point. You know, you're not having to redo your whole irrigation system. You're not up thousands of dollars, digging up your whole yard. There are some things that we can do that are really low impact and you know, low cost wise as to get into this. Excuse me. The other thing that I want to talk about, and it's one of the things that we've talked about in the Energy and Conservation Commission, and it's especially applicable to the West End folks that are out on the West End. We've got a ton of irrigation canals that run through the West End. And if you're near one of those, like Lewis said, if you can tie into a non-potable water system for irrigation, you're saving the city a ton of money by not having to treat and pump this water to you. Let gravity do its work. The water's coming to you free down the stream. So that's one thing that I've done in my home. I happen to live right off of the city high ditch, and I bought a pump, and now we're going to be starting to use ditch water as much as I can. So I guess with that, I can kind of wrap it up and take some questions for you.
I have a question about the irrigation ditches. Is that the water that farmers use, and is there problems with that water running out or?
It is typically used by farmers, yes. As far as it running out, in my experience, it fluctuates. The height of the ditch fluctuates during the day, depending on the usage of the farmers typically. But I think with, you know, again, there's one thing I missed to talk about is timing. Setting up your irrigation to run at the best times during the day. You don't want to be irrigating when it's 95 degrees outside. Let's go ahead and water in the early morning when the water has a chance to soak in before it just evaporates into the air. So timing, I think, would play into that with availability of canal water is, you know, make sure that you're getting out there and using it when it's available. Okay, the first row here.
My irrigation system is tied to a well,
Okay.
and I think it was mentioned that there are some shallow pockets. What is the health of those aquifers?
I know that they're declining. What we've seen is, as the West End develops, we're seeing that flood irrigation that was spoken about earlier has declined. The use of that has declined, as well as the number of wells being punched into this shallow aquifer has increased. So we're seeing a reduction in the ability to rehydrate those, recharge those aquifers, in addition to more people sucking out of it. So West End, I know the shallow aquifers have been on decline and continue to do so. It probably will be an issue as we move forward with some of those older wells that now they're part of the year they might be running dry. Way in the back.
With using water from the ditch, we have to have water rights with the property.
Correct, yeah. You don't want to, I should mention that, don't just start pumping water out. Most properties, especially if you're directly on the canal, have water rights that accompany them, but you need to certainly do your research and purchase those if available. Yes?
Has there been any discussion about financial incentives, particularly with new developments, to do the zero landscaping bit?
I think that's gonna be one of our next steps as a commission. Up till now, we've really just been kind of getting our hands on understanding what our consumption is. I think the next step is going to be suggesting to council different ways that we can encourage conservation, and those might be some of those ways. Yes?
Just curious, we're still old school, we don't have an irrigation system.
Mm-hmm.
So what would you recommend for someone who's using hoses and, moving the sprinklers around every day?
At a minimum, I would encourage you to at least make use of those timers that can go on your garden hose. I mean, I think that's a common sense one, so you don't forget about it, because that's easy to do. We've all probably done that. I guess one thing you might do is make sure that you're understanding the need. So before you go turn that hose on, go put a little shovel down into the ground or something and try to get an understanding of where your dry spots are, and trying to make use of that. I can't, building and designing an irrigation system and installing it is an expensive process. And I understand that, for a lot of families that's not in the cards. But I think there's still things we can all do to help conserve, so. Yes?
Do you have to filter that ditch water for your
Yes, yeah. So there's filtration is definitely a component. And again, deciding what heads to use and what kind of spray heads and those types of things is going to change a little if you're using ditch water versus a potable water system. You're going to want to have the ability for some silt and things to pass through. So I think I'm getting kicked out.
But Neil is going to be at this table back here to answer any more questions that you might have specific to your situation. And I forgot to mention that we also have some handouts at Neil's table that point you to the Water Smart website that Louis talked about. So 2 resources are still available today. Our last speaker we are fortunate enough to have is Sharon Wetch. Sharon grew up in eastern Montana and can't remember a time without a garden. She has been a master gardener since 2007 and was instrumental in starting master gardener classes and has been teaching and taught them for about 5 years. Sharon was chosen to be the state of Montana Master Gardener of the Year for both 2014 and 2015. And was also one of the founding members of the Yellowstone County Master Gardener Association and served as their vice president for 6 years. Sharon continues to facilitate classes and has a plethora of information at this table back here after we're done today. So we'll be back there with Ruita to answer any questions you have. So I'm sure you'll have a lot. Since Sharon started reporting and logging her hours in 2012, she has given approximately 2,500 volunteer hours. Sharon has a demonstration garden at Zoo Montana that you can check out. It's called the Plant Select Garden. It is affiliated with Colorado State University and Denver Botanical Gardens, featuring plants that are the same longitude and latitude as Billings, and test these perennials to see how they will do here. Sharon is going to get down to the nuts and bolts of how you can get information. She'll share some information about reducing water usage in your yard. Please give a warm welcome to Sharon Wetch.
Good morning. I've been a master gardener for quite some time now, and we learn a lot of stuff through our classes and through the seminars that we go to. And if anybody's interested in joining us and learning all about your plants, all about your conservation, how everything grows, how to make it grow better, We've got a sign-up sheet over there, and we'd be happy to send you information right before the classes start. They are online now, so you don't even have to show up. You can just do it at home at your leisure. It's a great program. We do a lot of stuff around the town here. There's a lot of planting. I know we've got one back here, Joyce and Ron are members, and they take care of the Veterans Park up here. So when you go by, you will see a lot of really pretty flowers on the corner, and thank you for that. I go to a lot of seminars, and I'm always open to any information I can get. One of the seminars that I went to in the Seattle Flower Show this year was all about how to save water. They talk about the plants that you can use. My Plant Select garden is basically a water-wise garden. Once these plants are started, and after about, well, the first year you water them like you probably would any other plant in your yard. Second year, they require less water, but by the third year, they're established. They require almost no water. Your rainwater should pretty much take care of these. We watch them out there to make sure that that's what's happening. Right now, no one is really covering these or carrying these in town here. The closest is up at Tizer Gardens in Helena, or down to Sheridan to Landers. It's a greenhouse down there, and they do carry Plant Select. If you'd like to go see the gardens, it's right by the children's play area at the zoo. You can't miss it. It's got all these logs all around it. Myself and Brian Godfrey, who is our Master Garden president, built this from the ground up, and it's really pretty neat. You'll have to check it out. We talked a lot about lawns. A lot of people aren't doing their lawns correctly to save water. You know, your lawn doesn't need all the water that you're giving it. What Master Gardener says is probably twice a week you water more heavily, and then you water in between, because then your roots are going to go down to where that water is. They're going to seek out going down. Then when it gets hot out, that grass isn't going to brown over. It's not going to be nearly as stressed because it can still get to the water source. One of the things that you can do, in my little box of goodies back here, if you have a sprinkler system, or even if you're just doing a hose drip system, water for your amount of time, you should have 1 inch of water a week. You can take a tuna fish can, you can take a cat food can, you can set it out there where the water's sprinkling and check and see how much water you've put on. Then take your little water meter and put it in where your roots are and check and see how much water you actually have in there. You're gonna want to water early in the day, because when that sprinkler system is going off at about noon or 2, all that water's, you're not getting much on your lawn. It's going up in the air and evaporating. So you're really not doing yourself any good. You're wasting a lot of water that way. But these little tools can be really handy, not only for your lawn. You use it on your garden. You can check how much water you're actually getting to your garden. Then you know exactly when you need to water, or when you need, if you need to water more or less. It's just common sense, but these things are really handy. They're about $12 to $15. You can get them at the hardware stores. You can get them at any of the garden centers. They're handy. I suggest picking one up. They're also great for your plants. They'll tell you when they need to be watered. Now, I don't have any of my plants on the drip system. Some of us, it's a little costly to do that. So I kind of cheat, and I'm going to tell you how I cheat. This is something that I picked up at the Seattle Flower Show. It is a watering device. This goes into your planter, right about where your roots and stuff are. This is clay. It's porous. The water comes out of it. You can put any kind of a bottle upside down in there with water, and it's going to water your plant until this runs out of water. Then you refill it and put it back in there, and it's continually watering your plant slowly. It uses less water that way. It also keeps your plant from drying out. The other thing that I have used is water beads. I get those off the internet. They're little tiny, like a BB, and when you put water with them, they grow. You can put them in with your soil, and if your soil starts getting a little dry, that will release the water back into the soil until you take and water it again. Those are really handy to use. For your big pots that sit out, I've got a couple that I sit out on my driveway, and I don't like hauling the hose out there and filling them. So, when I was in Seattle, we saw a product called an Oya. It's kind of shaped like a gourd. They had a narrow neck at the top, and then it went down like this. And you filled this reservoir with water. It's the same principle, it's clay. You filled that with water, and it continued to water that plant at the root level. Your plant really doesn't need anything at the top, it needs the roots fed. So my girlfriend and I went home and we made our own Oyas. They wanted about $35 for each one at the Seattle Flower Show. Ours cost about $5. They're handy, they're easy to do. Let me show you what we did. You need to get a pot. You can use any size, depends on what you're going to put it into. You need to get the ones with the holes in the bottom. First thing I did was took my little E6000 glue, which works very well, by the way, and I left the paper on the bottom so I could fill that hole. If you don't fill that hole up with your silicone glue, you're going to lose all your water right away. So you need to fill that up. Then we took and we glued these two together like so with the same glue, and it does hold. Then you take a little piece of your hosing, and for as deep as you want to plant this, you take and you put this in the top, and you're going to silicone this into there too, so it doesn't just pull out when you've got it buried. And you cut it off wherever you want it as far as how deep you're going to plant it. Then I take a funnel, and I just stick the funnel in there, and I take my watering can and I fill it up till it gurgles up to the top. And you can leave it for a week or so. You just, you'll know when it's empty, and then you'll know about how often you have to do this. It's really fun. You don't have to go out there every day with your little watering can, because it saves you a lot of time too. And it's fun to do. If you ever have any questions, come on over and I'll show you what I did again. We have a lot of information out there that is available to the public. It's all through MSU. I have some of these little wooden nickels over there. Our extension agent just retired, but this has the MSU website on it. You can go on there and get way more information than I have provided today. We have stuff over there on almost every subject you could want. Another thing that they were talking about when they were talking about lawns, we just had Arbor Day up in the Heights. And one of the gals was sitting there and she was complaining that it was costing them so much to water their lawn. Well, we got to talking. I said, well, how short are you cutting your lawn? She said, oh, pretty short. It kind of looks like a golf course. Well, you don't need grass that short. All you're doing is stressing your grass. Grass can be 2.5 to 3 inches tall. It'll maintain that green, pretty stuff, and those roots will go down and find that water if you just water properly, and it will save a lot of water. The other thing that they were talking about is when you mow your grass, leave those clippings on. They're providing a mulch, which keeps your moisture in your grass. It's not going to hurt a thing. The mower is going to keep chopping them up as you go. It's going to be good. You can also buy now low water grasses. They say that they will save you 70% of what you're watering your grass, of the water that you're using on your grass, just by changing what kind of grass you have. You can take and buy this, you can intersperse it with what you have, you can spread it, put a little bit of mulch, soil on it, and let it grow. Let it go in between what you have now, and it will help you save water. It's always a good idea if we're gonna, we're looking at the future, and the water isn't gonna be available, so we might as well start now and do the things that we can to help keep everything like it should. To keep it pretty to where it's aesthetically pretty to us and we like it. And you can do it using a whole lot less water. One of the things that you can do if your flower bed has just soil that you're looking at, you can take your grass clippings and you can mulch with it. That will also keep moisture in. You can use wood chips if you'd like. It doesn't matter. If you want to prevent weeds, you can take your old newspapers, you can dampen them, lay those down, and then mulch over the top of those. That will help keep your weeds down. That's also a really nice time saver, because who wants to pick weeds? I just want to look at the flowers. I don't want to have to pick weeds. If you do a drip system, thank you. If you do a drip system, I would suggest that you talk to some of these people that know what they're doing so that you're not wasting water when you do. It's just a better idea. One of the things that we are trying to get into is native plants. And we have a booklet over there all about your native landscapes and native plants, and help yourself. They're there for your convenience. The native plants not only are better for all of our properties because they will start earlier in the spring, they'll go longer in the fall than anything you're going to bring in and plant each year. They provide the food for your wildlife, your birds, your bees. It's a better solution. They don't use as much water. They're acclimated here. You're going to have less water usage because this plant was always native here. It has learned to adapt to our weather systems. It's been a little trying in the last couple of years, but we're getting better. Your native plants also sequester more of your carbon dioxide from the air, and they put it back into the ground. They give you oxygen. So this is something we can do to help with climate control, climate change. If you plant your natives, you're going to have easier lawns, easier care. You're helping the environment. They say that by the end of this century, 30% of your carbon sequestration is done through your native plants. So please, people, take a copy of this book with you and look through it. It's got some really good information. Are there any questions? Yes.
Over the last couple of years, I've read suggestions that people plant clover instead of grass. And whenever I've talked to people in Billings about it, they don't seem to know anything about it.
I'm not real sure about planting clover. One of the things that I have used is creeping thyme. You can put creeping thyme in areas, if you have a walkway, creeping thyme around it is really good. It doesn't use a lot of water. It never has to be mowed. It's dense enough. You do not have any weeds in it because they just can't. You don't get the sunlight through there, so they don't. You don't need it. You can walk on it, and it doesn't hurt it a bit. It springs back up. Creeping thyme is one of the things that you can use instead of grass. Your ground covers, if you check your ground covers, a lot of those can be put in instead of grass. You can make areas with your succulent gardens, your henna chicks, all those succulents. They just aren't going to use as much water. Might be nice to have a little spot where it's just pretty. Anyone else? Yes.
Where I live, we got a lot of clay in the soil, and I had neighbor, I watered less frequent. Neighbor said, no, you shouldn't do that, that's soil. Water more frequent, not so much. You run into that?
Clay soil will hold the water more. That's the one nice thing about clay, it's just that you'll drown some of your plants because they aren't getting the air that they need. I'm combating my clay soil, I'm adding compost. Home composting is a great thing. You can, instead of putting all this stuff in the landfill, which is another way we can help save our planet, you can take your food scraps and stuff. I've got a handout on home composting up there. You can put it back into your ground. I did not have a compost system going last winter. We just moved to town not very long ago. So I dug a hole in my yard, about this big around, about this deep. I threw all my garden scrap, or my kitchen scraps, your potato peels, your peels from your carrots, anything extra. If a carrot got a little dried out, I threw that in. Banana peels. Your roses love banana peels, by the way, and so do all the worms. Leaves, everything that I composted, eggshells, coffee grounds, it all goes into this hole. Now this spring, it's just dark, pretty, nice soil. I dig that out, I add it to my flower beds for compost, or any place else where I'm trying to make my soil better. Does that help? I would try to amend your soil using your natural compost. Anything organic.
Aerate.
Yeah, aerating helps too if it's in a lawn. Yes?
If you're talking about like your garden area as opposed to a farm, I've been starting to use cover crops, and I planted peas and I think it was oats, and the oats have a pretty deep root, and they just go in there. I was amazed at what a difference it made in my clay soil.
You're
Just
talking about flower bed?
Yes, yes. What a difference it made in the garden. Just the roots go down and just create all these pathways and loosen that soil up, and the peas, of course, the nitrogen.
It does. One of the other things that you can do too, one of the things that I am going to be doing this summer is I'm just getting ready to put a garden in, and I have it's been watered, it's been nothing but grass and trees forever. So when I go to even dig into it, it's like really hard to get anything in it. So I am planting on top, I'm taking newspapers, laying them out, they will smother the grass underneath it. Then I'm putting rows of good soil and compost on top. I am going to plant into the tops of those. That will leach down into that clay, and it will loosen that clay up. And some of those roots will go into that clay, which will also loosen that up. It depends on what your usage is. Are you using it for flowers? Are you using it for grass? Are you using it for garden? Are you just putting trees in? It makes a difference. I'm done.
But please do stop by to see Sharon with the rest of your questions. They're great questions, and that was fantastic information. Thank you so much. I'm going to wrap up here with our door prizes. Maggie over here is going to run the door prize for us. Our speakers were wonderful today. Please give them all a nice one. First, what are we doing first, Maggie? Oh, the Beehive Smart Water Controller for your irrigation system. We'll go with that one first, donated by the league.
Yeah.
And if you wouldn't mind leaving it up there until we're done today, if you can stay so people can get a look at it. Good job. Shelley works for the Public Works Department. So if you have questions about Water Smart, she's another good resource. And next we have a low water plant donated by Canyon Creek Nursery.
Very,
Truffle?
it's a sedum succulent.
Sedum succulent.
Pat Anderson?
Yes. And what do we got next?
Soil monitoring.
Oh, master? Yes, like Sharon talked about, for checking the moisture in your soil. Good tool.
David Owen?
David?
Well, I hand water, so this will be another way to test it.
Perfect.
I should go.
Yeah.
Ready to go, Dan?
Yeah.
And next we have,
Dewalt Garden.
oh, mission to Dan Walt Gardens. So you can go out there and get some ideas about how you want to structure your new landscaping. 2 entrance tickets.
Connie Jenner?
Connie. Gaynor. And then last is, I don't know if many of you have heard of Charter Ranch. They create this vermicast, which is worm castings, and Sharon maybe can tell you some more about that, and there are some brochures there, but it's supposed to be the ultimate fertilizer for your garden. 2 25-pound bags. Our first winner.
Oh,
And our second winner.
I thought there was only one.
Oh, there's only one winner. All right, so let's draw.
Dump all the other ones. Pull it out.
Just pull one out of one of the other jars, I guess. Let's see.
How about Joyce Hendricks?
Joyce, can you use that? Fantastic. Well, thank you all for coming. I want to just add a quick note that the league is co-sponsoring an event up at MSU on the 23rd to celebrate the 50th anniversary of the Montana Constitution. So if anyone's interested in learning more about the creation of the Constitution and the meaning of the guiding document in our lives, there are some flyers up there at the head table, and you can find out more about where and when. Thank you all very much for coming today.
Unbelievable.